People say that justice usually knocks with the gavel of a judge, but that day it came through the singing voice of an 8-year-old child, singing in the same house that had once known betrayal. I, Franklin Cole, had lost nearly everything in life: my wife, my faith, and finally, the son-in-law I once thought of as family, and my daughter, Sarah, the one who had once been lost in lies, now stood beside me, holding her child's hand, singing together. But when my granddaughter asked, "Grandpa, is my dad still a bad person?" I realized that true justice doesn't lie in a verdict, but in how we teach the next generation to love without blindness, and in how a mother relearns the meaning of courage, not through tears, but through the act of standing up to protect her child. If you've ever believed that silence could defeat the noise of deceit, if you've ever thought an old man couldn't change the fate of his own family, stay, because this story will make you understand. Light never disappears. It only waits for someone brave enough to ignite it again. Before we begin, please subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and tell me where you're listening from. Because somewhere out there, someone sitting in the dark might need a story like this to remember that sometimes justice wears the face of a grandfather and the trembling voice of a daughter who finally found herself again. They say people grow accustomed to silence as they age, but there are kinds of silence no one should get used to, especially on their own birthday. That year, I turned 62. I spent the entire afternoon preparing dinner for 6 people: my daughter, her husband, and his side of the family. Lasagna, exactly the way Margaret, my late wife, gone 7 years ago, used to make it. I carefully layered the cheese, the tomato sauce, each step feeling like a quiet conversation between me and her. And this time, there was another reason to look forward to it. My 8-year-old granddaughter, Emily. She used to call me Grandpa Frankie, her voice lilting like a tune. Just last week, she had video called me asking, "Grandpa, will your cake have candles shaped like a 6 and a 2? I want to blow them out with you." I laughed. "If you come, you can blow all of them out." She tilted her head, her curly hair brushing her shoulders, then sang a spontaneous birthday song that nearly made me tear up. Emily had a way of lighting up the entire house just with her laughter, and sometimes I thought my own children didn't understand me as well as that little girl did. The day before, while checking the mailbox on my porch, I received an envelope from Summit Credit Union. Inside was a notice of change in authorization for the joint savings account under my and Sarah's names, the account we had opened when she graduated, meant to save for Emily's future. The small italic line read, "New authorized signer, Trent Green." I froze. For more than 10 years, that account had held only 2 names, mine and my daughter's, and no one else had ever been allowed access. I called the hotline. The representative said, "Sir, the change was made online and verified via the account holder's email." I hung up, trying to reassure myself that maybe Sarah just wanted a convenience for family finances, but unease clung to my mind like rust on steel. I started cooking at noon, playing Margaret's favorite soft jazz, and set the table with the porcelain dishes she reserved for special occasions. On the walnut table, I placed 6 crystal glasses, polished until they were as clear as the water in a summer lake. A bottle of Pinot Noir, 2012, stood open, waiting to be poured. On the cake, "Happy 62nd Franklin" was written in chocolate frosting, a cheerful wish from someone who'd forgotten no one would read it. I also set aside a small plate by the opposite chair, the one I always told Emily to sit in when she visited. On it was her portion of lasagna, without chili. She hated spicy food, and a butter cookie I'd shaped into a cat. "Because you like cats," I remembered her saying. "Grandpa, remember, cats, not dogs." I even placed her tiny ukulele by the chair, hoping that if she came, she'd sing, "You Are My Sunshine," like she did last year. Just the thought made me smile. I looked around the room. Everything was perfect, except for one thing. The clock showed 8:45, and still no car had stopped outside. Sarah had promised to come at 6. "Dad, I want you to meet Trent's family," she had said, cheerful and bright. I had believed her. I had waited. I walked to the window and looked down Ashford Drive. Under the yellow glow of the street lamp, only dry leaves rolled in the wind. The Martinez house next door was bright and filled with Latin music. Through the glass, I saw them laughing together, children running around the table, warm air from the oven fogging the window. That morning, Mrs. Martinez had waved at me. "Mr. Cole, you're having a birthday dinner tonight, right? I'll bring some apple pie." I had smiled. "No need. I have plenty. My family's coming." Yet now, all I could hear was the ticking of the pendulum clock, the one Margaret's father gave her in 1964. She used to say it kept perfect time because it was made with love. It still kept perfect time. The only difference was that each tick now sounded like it was counting down the minutes of loneliness. 9:15. The lasagna had cooled for the second time. I poured myself a glass of wine, then didn't drink it. The cake sat untouched. I picked up my phone, stared at the blank screen. No missed calls, no messages. I tapped Sarah's name. Her voice came after 3 rings, blended with the sound of ocean waves and Hawaiian music. "Dad, I'm sorry. We're having a small situation. Trent has a client emergency." I listened silently. She continued quickly, evenly. "We completely forgot the schedule. I'm really sorry. We'll make it up later, okay?" I tried to sound calm. "Where are you, Sarah?" There was wind and someone laughing faintly. Just a business trip, Dad. Hawaii." Then Trent's voice cut in. "Tell him we can't come back. Business doesn't wait." The call ended after 3 minutes and 42 seconds, long enough for me to understand that the daughter who once called me her hero was now just a distant voice reading lines. But as I set the phone down, the image of the bank envelope flashed in my mind again. If this business trip was real, why had Trent just been added as an authorized signer on Sarah's account? The so-called urgent work suddenly sounded more like a cover. I had no proof yet, but a lifetime of dealing with numbers told me something didn't add up. I looked at the empty chair where I used to hold Emily on my lap, teaching her to cut cake with a plastic knife. "Grandpa, when I grow up, I'll bake cakes for you so you won't have to," she once said. I smiled faintly, but my chest tightened. Not because Sarah hadn't come, but because I knew Emily probably didn't even know about this trip. If she had, she would have secretly called, begged Trent to let her come home, sung happy birthday over the phone, like she always did. I stood still for a few minutes, and then put down my phone and opened my old laptop. I hadn't used social media since Margaret passed, but that night, something urged me. I logged back into Facebook, same password, Margaret Love 62. The page appeared, dust of time covering old condolences. I typed Trent Green into the search bar. Countless photos popped up. The first caption made me freeze. "Blessed to spend quality time with the family that truly matters. Maui, Hawaii." In the photo, Trent was smiling under a sunset, cocktail in hand, wearing a bright floral shirt. Beside him, Sarah beamed, wearing a red dress I had never seen before. Behind them, Trent's parents raised their glasses, golden light glinting on the water. I didn't feel angry, not yet, only something hollow, cold and metallic. I clicked through each photo, noting the timestamp. Friday, 6:23 p.m. At that exact moment in Dayton, I had just sprinkled the last layer of cheese on the lasagna. They were across the ocean while I was still waiting here. Some say pain is when you know you've been betrayed. But there's another kind, when you realize the betrayer doesn't even think they've done wrong. In the photo caption, Trent had added, "No better way to celebrate family bonds." I laughed, dry and metallic, like a coin hitting the floor. When the clock struck 10, I cleared the table. I didn't throw the food away, just wrapped it in foil and placed it in the fridge. Enough for a week, I thought. Then I looked around the house, the photo frame of Margaret, the empty chair where she used to read, and the picture of Emily hugging my neck and kissing my cheek last Christmas. I love you to the moon and back, she had written in pink marker. I touched the photo, whispering, I love you that much too. Something changed in that instant, not despair, something sharper. An engineer doesn't cry when a system fails. He finds the error, then fixes it. I sat at the table, took out my small notebook, and wrote the first line in 7 years. May 23rd, Trent lied. Sarah joined him. Photos confirm they're in Hawaii. Objective, find the reason. I closed the notebook, glanced at the clock. 10:47. Outside, wind from the Miami Valley carried the smell of wet grass and the lavender Margaret once planted by the porch. I inhaled deeply. She wouldn't want to see me this hurt, but she'd want me to do what's right. I opened the laptop again, searched Private Investigator, Dayton, Ohio. One name stood out. Buckeye Investigations. James Caron, former Montgomery County detective. I noted the number. 11 p.m., too late to call, but not too early to begin again. I saved the contact, closed the lid, and blew out the half-burned candle. The scent of wax filled the room, blending with the cold cheese. Before bed, I texted Sarah one line. No anger, no blame. If Emily asks why I didn't blow out the candles, tell her I'm still waiting for her. I knew she might never read it, but I also knew someday the child would. That night, I dreamed of nothing, only the steady ticking of the pendulum clock, as if reminding me that from this moment on, everything would change. An empty birthday dinner had become the opening act for what Trent Green never expected. I might be old, but I was never weak. And if he thought he could redefine family with photos from Hawaii, he would soon learn that sometimes justice wears reading glasses and a navy suit. The next morning, summer light streamed through the curtains, falling over the dinner table still marked by last night's unwashed dishes, an open wine bottle, and the cat-shaped cookie I had baked for Emily, resting quietly beside the empty chair. I touched the chair, remembering how she once swung her legs while eating, saying, "Grandpa, I got picked to carry the flag at school today." Then she'd look up, eyes bright. "I'll tell my teacher I practiced blowing candles at your house." The memory eased my chest a little, like part of her still lingered here, among the steady ticks of the clock. I made coffee and sat in Margaret's favorite chair. Sunlight glinted off an old photo, me, her, and 7-year-old Sarah at a picnic in Indian Lake. Margaret was in a straw hat, hair messy from the wind, and Sarah was laughing so hard her eyes were closed. Back then I was young, and happiness felt like the most natural thing in the world. 7 years since Margaret passed, I still wasn't used to saying I instead of we. Margaret died in October 2016. Sarah was 29 then, newly working as a nurse in Columbus. I feared she'd collapse, but she held strong, or at least seemed to. She took care of me, cooked, cleaned, and spent long, cold evenings with me in the now half-empty house. I thought losing Margaret meant losing half my life. But with Sarah, I still had a reason to move forward. And when Emily was born, laughter returned, the sound of small feet running, the smell of baked cookies on weekends. "Grandpa, you bake worse than Mom," the girl once teased, "but I like your cookies better." I wrote that line in my notebook, a reminder that love never dies. It just changes carriers. But about 3 years ago, things began to shift. Calls grew shorter, from hours to minutes. Sunday breakfasts vanished. The reasons were always a long shift. Trent's got work, or I need to take Emily to piano. Last week, when I casually asked, "Sarah, I saw something from the bank about our joint account. Do you know what that is?" She paused for a few seconds, then replied quickly, "Oh, Trent said it's easier if he can sign too, since I'm on night shifts." Her voice trembled slightly, then she changed the subject. It sounded reasonable, but something in it clashed. Sarah had never let anyone touch our savings, especially the money meant for Emily. I didn't suspect anything. I just missed my granddaughter. Each time that feeling came, I'd stop by Kroger, buy gummy bears or watercolor sets for Emily. I kept them in the kitchen drawer, waiting for her visits like a small ritual. I still remember the first afternoon Trent came to my house, when he and Sarah had just started dating. It was early autumn, sunlight golden like honey, and Margaret had been gone almost a year. Sarah glowed that day, carrying a joy that made me both happy and cautious. She called me to the porch, her voice bright. "Dad, I want you to meet Trent. He's wonderful." I remember him stepping up the stairs, holding a bouquet of white lilies, smiling so brightly I had to squint. "I work in real estate, mostly in Columbus," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I admire how you keep everything neat and organized." I smiled, trying to see past the polish. Back then, I thought he was just a confident young man eager to impress his girlfriend's father. I didn't know he was studying me, every word, every habit, like a long-term project. After the wedding, Sarah moved fully to Columbus. I visited a few times, but each visit made me feel like a stranger in my own family. Trent often cut into conversations between me and Sarah, correcting each sentence. Once, when I told Emily how I'd built model airplane wings for her mother, he interrupted. "Technology's changed, Mr. Cole. That stuff's outdated." Sarah gave an awkward smile, and I simply nodded. Old men learn silence the way pilots learn emergency landings, quietly, precisely, and with hearts pounding unseen. This morning I reopened my notebook. Last night's ink had dried. I added a new line. Step 1, verify. Step 2, evidence. Then I picked up the phone, dialing the number I saved, Buckeye Investigations. The voice on the other end was deep, steady, certain. "James Caron's office. Good morning." I introduced myself briefly. He paused for a moment, then said, "I can tell by your voice you've thought this through. Meet me Friday morning at the cafe near Dayton Mall. I'll bring my notebook. You bring your reason." I chuckled softly. "I've got more reasons than pages." Karen replied, "Good. Men like you make the best clients, because they don't want revenge, they want the truth." I hung up, opened the fridge, and poured a glass of water. There, taped to the door, was a note Emily had drawn last month. A heart in crayon. Scrawled words, "Grandpa, I love you 100%. No discounts." I laughed, then felt my eyes sting. That little note was proof that goodness still existed, even after I'd seen the darker side of family. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up. Dishes washed, table cleared. I put everything away except Emily's chair. It stayed as a reminder that not everyone had forgotten me. I turned on the computer, created a new folder, Trent Green file. Inside, I saved screenshots from his Facebook posts, noted timestamps and location tags. Maui, Grand Wailea Resort. I checked Google Maps, calculated flight durations, and compared time zones. Every detail matched perfectly, enough to prove that the work emergency call had been nothing but a play. In the afternoon, I went to the backyard to mow the grass and water the plants. Margaret once planted lilacs there. The flower, she said, smells like memory. I cut a few stems, placed them in a small vase, and set it beside her photo. As the sun dipped, the room filled with soft amber light. The wind rustled through the trees, and in my mind, I could almost hear Emily's voice. "Grandpa, I'll come soon. Mom said we'll visit in the summer." I wanted to believe that. I had to. At night, I brewed a cup of black tea and sat by the window. In the sky, small points of light were scattered, like the circuit diagrams I used to design. Life, after all, is just a chain of connections. Where something breaks, you find a way to solder it back. And I, even at 62, was still clear-headed enough to hold the iron again. I opened my notebook. May 24th. Contacted James Caron. Meeting set for Friday. I closed it and placed it beside Margaret's photo and Emily's heart-shaped card. "If you're both here," I whispered, "help me do this right. Not to retaliate, but so Sarah understands. Family is never something you get to redefine." Before bed, I turned on the answering machine and recorded a message. "If anyone calls for Franklin Cole, please leave a message. I'm busy fixing something. The most important thing in life. Trust. Then I turned off the lights. In the darkness, the scent of lilac still lingered, and the pendulum clock ticked steadily, like a countdown to my first meeting with the man who would help me uncover the truth. Friday, 9 a.m. Dayton was unusually clear, the kind of clarity where you can see each speck of dust floating in the sunlight. I chose the pale blue shirt Margaret liked, buttoned it carefully, then put on my old coat. Before leaving the house, I looked at the dining table. Emily's small chair was still beside mine. On the table, I placed a scribbled note. Grandpa's meeting a friend back before dinner. No one would read it, but writing it helped me feel I still lived in a world where someone waited. I arrived at Dayton Mall 15 minutes early. The Cafe Bean Theory sat on the second-floor corner beside an old bookstore. The sound of the espresso machine mixed with shoppers' footsteps, creating a noise that was half busy, half calm. At the window table sat a man reading In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, just as the phone voice had described. Brown leather jacket, neatly kept gray hair, eyes that seemed to read the whole room without looking directly. "Mr. Cole?" he asked as I approached. I nodded. "James Karen," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm and dry, the kind of hand that had written many reports and cuffed more people than I'd ever met. We sat. He poured me black coffee and took out a leather notebook and a silver pen. "Now, tell me where it all began." I spoke slowly, about the empty birthday, about Sarah's distant voice on the phone, and the bank envelope marked, "New authorized signer, Trent Green." I told him how Sarah had accidentally admitted Trent could sign on our joint account and then deflected. "I don't know what he's after," I said, "but when a man starts touching money, that isn't his. Sooner or later, he'll touch trust." Karen paused his pen, nodding, a sign he understood I wasn't just tracking a liar, but the crack in my family itself. I recounted, slow, clear, no embellishment, the birthday, the call, the photo from Hawaii. Karan didn't interrupt, only occasionally jotting a few short notes. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me. "Trent Green, 35, real estate agent, Columbus, attractive, confident, smart enough to charm." He raised an eyebrow. "I've seen that type hundreds of times." "I don't want him in jail, Mr. Karen," I said. "I just want Sarah to see who he is." "Sometimes those two things overlap," he replied quietly, "and you need to understand. People under manipulation rarely know they're being controlled. You can't just tell your daughter. You have to show her." He pulled out a sheet, listing what he'd do. Check public financial records, verify licenses, track company transactions, cross-reference social media, and, if necessary, collect photos from public places or witnesses. "All legal," he said. "We don't break laws. We just reconnect what others try to hide." I nodded. "I trust you." He looked at me with a slight smile. "No, you trust the truth. I just help you find it." I took an envelope with $2,000 from my pocket. "Retainer. I don't want to waste time." He didn't count it. "We start today, huh? I need the license plate, address, company name, and any details you remember." I had prepared a sheet. Trent Green, Pacific Realty, Columbus, plate OHR 2195, gray Lexus GX 460. He glanced, nodded. "Thorough. I like meticulous clients." As the meeting ended, he stood and gripped my hand. "Within 7 days, I'll call. But be ready. What we find may hurt before it relieves." I answered, "I lost my wife. Nothing can hurt me more." His eyes softened. "I hope you're right." I left the cafe, walked down a corridor, lined with shining mirrors. My reflection repeated. A 62-year-old man with a face so calm. Even I found it strange. No tremor, no fear. Just a mind as clear as a circuit board. That afternoon, I returned home, opened the computer, and created another folder, James Karen Files. Inside, I stored scans of his card, the payment receipt, and a photo of the note. Everything is neat, like a technical project. But when I looked at Emily's small chair, my heart softened. I opened her old toy box. Inside were some marbles, a broken-arm doll, and the plastic watch she called the superhero clock. I remembered the last time we went to Riverscape Park. She ran around the fountain holding ice cream, laughing, "Grandpa, when I grow up, I'll be a detective. I'll find out who ate your cookies." I laughed hard, but now it felt like a prophecy. "Kid," I murmured, "I'm actually investigating." That evening, Sarah called. Her voice was calm, slightly tired. "Dad, I'm sorry about the birthday. We were caught up in things." "I understand," I replied, using I instead of Dad. The cold phrasing was necessary. "Is Emily okay?" She sounded surprised. "Of course, why?" "I just want to be sure she's not missing anything." Sarah was silent for a long moment. "Dad, sometimes I feel you're still living in the past. I have my own family now." "Family," I echoed softly. "Yes, I know." I hung up as gently as folding a page. That night I went into the garden, planted more solar lights around the lilac bed. Their small glow blinked like my own private constellation. I looked up at the sky, whispering, "Margaret, I've begun, not to get revenge, but to keep our daughter from falling into the hands of a man who uses love as leverage." The next day, James texted, "Suspicious financial activity confirmed. Green had 2 loan applications denied in March, verifying income sources." I read and sat still for a long time. No more anger, only the feeling of spotting a hairline crack in a steel frame, knowing it will spread if not treated right. Monday night, another call from Karan. "Mr. Cole, can you confirm the date Trent and Sarah flew to Hawaii?" "Friday, May 19th. Departed Columbus." "Thank you, I ask because there's evidence of a Vegas transaction the same day. Looks like they stopped 3 days in Nevada before Maui." "Vegas?" I repeated. "Yes, I have images. You'll want to see them." I gripped the phone, a cold weight in my chest. I didn't yet know what those images showed, only that they would change how I saw that man forever. But I also understood that from that moment, the plan had truly started running. Before sleeping, I opened my notebook and added the last line for that day. May 26th, Vegas. Perhaps justice is moving in the right direction. Then I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and looked out the window, where the small garden lights I had set up were twinkling like guiding signals. There's a very strange feeling when you begin to regain control of your life, not with a shout, but with silence. I woke earlier than usual, at 5 in the morning, Dayton still foggy. The house was cold, but I didn't turn on the heater. I brewed coffee and opened the window to let the early breeze in. The smell of wet grass and lilac filled the room like a morning greeting. The phone on the table lit up. A message from James Karen, just 2 lines. Additional data in. Green is moving money from his wife's account. Detailed report soon. I looked at the screen, didn't reply, and just saved it into a separate folder. Outside, the first light pierced the glass, and I could clearly see my own face reflected. Old, tired, but the eyes no longer weak. I sat at the table and opened the notebook. The newest line, Vegas. I wrote another line beneath it. No one fixes a crack with tears. I spent the whole morning cleaning, not to kill time, but to feel my rhythm of life again. I wiped each stair, sorted the stack of technical books for my years at General Dynamics, and changed the old curtains Margaret liked. On the table, I placed her photo next to Emily's watercolor painting of me with the words, "My Super Grandpa." That picture lay beside a photo of Sarah as a child, their smiles strangely identical. Perhaps what keeps me steady isn't memory, but continuity. At noon, I went to the old barber shop on 3rd Street. The owner, Howard, had cut my hair for 10 years. "Well, Mr. Cole, long time no see. Same cut as always?" I smiled. "No, shorter this time. I want to look neat." Howard looked at me through the mirror and nodded. "Special occasion? You look different today." "No occasion. I just want to see myself more clearly." When he handed me the mirror, I saw the reflected face, the same man, but tidier, more alert. I realized that sometimes to change your life, you only need to change how you look in the mirror. I stopped by the dry cleaners, bringing the old navy suit Margaret bought me for our 10th wedding anniversary. The shop owner, Miss Kim, looked at it and said in her familiar voice, "Well, it's been a while since I've seen this one. I remember your wife said blue makes you look trustworthy." I chuckled. She was always right. "Need it rushed?" "I need it before Friday." "Don't worry, I'll make it look new." I left the shop feeling oddly lighter, not because of the suit, but because I felt I was step by step reclaiming myself. The man who used to stand before dozens of young engineers, teaching them to solder joints accurate to each micrometer. An engineer doesn't lose control. He just needs time to recalibrate. In the afternoon, I received a small package from the electronics store, the Ring doorbell camera I had meant to install for 2 years. It took almost 2 hours to set up, but when the tiny light came on, signaling a successful connection, I felt as if I had given this house a new pair of eyes. Not out of fear, but to be ready for anything. When I finished, I stood on the porch, looked into the camera, and said to myself, "If justice comes knocking, I'll be the one to open the door." In the evening, James called. His voice was deep and steady. "Mr. Cole, we found an interesting detail. Before flying to Hawaii, Trent withdrew $15,000 from a co-owned account. The account is in both his and your daughter's names." I gripped the phone. "Does Sarah know?" "Not sure, but the transaction was made online from his device." "I understand. There's more," Corin continued. "I also found that he met a woman in Vegas, named Angela Wynn, PR staff for a casino conglomerate. We have photos." I was silent for a few seconds, then said slowly, "Keep all of it. I want everything in my hands when the time comes." After hanging up, I poured a small glass of wine, not to forget, but to remember. I went out to the porch and watched the trees whisper in the wind. Memories of Margaret returned. She used to say, "You know, the best thing about a man isn't his strength, but his calm when he knows he's right." I said softly into the air, "I'm relearning that, Maggie." I was about to go inside when the phone lit up, a short message from Sarah. "Dad, I hear Emily mentions you a lot. She says when she gets back, she'll bake with you." I looked at the line, unsure whether to be happy or sad. Perhaps inside Sarah there was still a small part of that girl who leaned on my shoulder at her mother's funeral. And Emily, though only 8, was the single thread still holding us together. I added to the notebook, "May 27th. There's still a bridge. Love sometimes survives in silence." The next day I woke early and walked around Eastwood Lake. I watched sunlight reflect on the water, smooth, cold, and honest. I understood that to move forward, I had to rinse away all bitterness. Because justice does not serve the resentful, it stands with the patient. At noon, I stopped by Nordstrom and picked a new tie, silver with diagonal stripes. The clerk asked, "What's the occasion?" I replied, "An important meeting, for a man who wants to be looked at with respect again." That night, when I hung the suit and tie together, the mirror no longer showed a forgotten father, but a man preparing for a presentation, maybe before a board, maybe before fate. I smiled. They will have to hear me, one way or another. Before bed, I called James again. "Mr. Karen," I said, "I want you to dig deeper. If Trent is hiding something, I need every piece of evidence. But it must be legal. I don't want to give him a chance to claim he was set up." "Understood," he said. "I'll do everything by the book. But you should also be ready. When it all comes out, it won't be only him who gets hurt." "I know," I said, "but I'm ready." I turned off the light and sat a moment in the dark. From the living room, the small lamp reflected on the photo of Sarah smiling with her daughter. 2 generations, 2 faces, and the same unspoken question. Who truly understands the value of family? I whispered like a promise. "You will see, Sarah. Not everyone who talks about love knows what love is." There is a very strange feeling when you begin to regain control of your life. not with a shout, but with silence. I woke earlier than usual at 5 in the morning, Dayton still foggy. The house was cold, but I didn't turn on the heater. I brewed coffee and opened the window to let the early breeze in. The smell of wet grass and lilac filled the room like a morning greeting. The phone on the table lit up. A message from James Karen, just 2 lines. Additional data in. Green is moving money from his wife's account. Detailed report, soon. I looked at the screen, my heart sinking slightly. Wife's account was actually the joint account under both my and my daughter's names. Maybe Sarah didn't know what he was doing, but I knew every transaction there. I had opened it for her the day she graduated. Now my own son-in-law was using the keyboard to reach into that past. I looked at the screen, didn't reply, and just saved it into a separate folder. Outside, the first light pierced the glass, and I could clearly see my own face reflected. Old, tired, but the eyes no longer weak. I sat at the table and opened the notebook. The newest line, Vegas. I wrote another line beneath it, no one fixes a crack with tears. I spent the whole morning cleaning, not to kill time, but to feel my rhythm of life again. I wiped each stair, sorted the stack of technical books from my years at General Dynamics, and changed the old curtains Margaret liked. On the table, I placed her photo next to Emily's watercolor painting of me with the words, "My super grandpa." That picture lay beside a photo of Sarah as a child, their smiles strangely identical. Perhaps what keeps me steady isn't memory, but continuity. At noon, I went to the old barber shop on 3rd Street. The owner, Howard, had cut my hair for 10 years. "Well, Mr. Cole, long time no see." "Same cut as always," I smiled. "No, shorter this time. I want to look neat." Howard looked at me through the mirror and nodded. "Special occasion? You look different today." "No occasion. I just want to see myself more clearly." When he handed me the mirror, I saw the reflected face. The same man, but tidier, more alert. I realized that sometimes, to change your life, you only need to change how you look in the mirror. I stopped by the dry cleaners, bringing the old navy suit Margaret had bought me for our 10th wedding anniversary. The shop owner, Ms. Kim, looked at the jacket and said in her familiar voice, "Well, it's been a long time since you brought this one in. I remember your wife used to say blue makes you look trustworthy." I smiled softly. She was always right. "Need it rushed?" "I need it before Friday." "Don't worry, I'll make it look new." I left the shop feeling a strange lightness, not because of the suit, but because I felt I was gradually reclaiming myself, the man who used to stand before dozens of young engineers, guiding them to solder joints precise down to each micrometer. An engineer never loses control. He just needs time to calibrate. In the afternoon, a small package arrived from the electronics store, the Ring doorbell camera I had meant to install for 2 years. It took almost 2 hours to set up, but when the small light came on, signaling a successful connection, I felt as if I had added a new pair of eyes to this house. Not out of fear, but to be prepared for anything. When I finished, I stood on the porch, looked into the camera, and told myself, if justice comes knocking, I'll be the one to open. In the evening, James called. His voice was deep and steady. "Mr. Cole, we found an interesting detail. Before flying to Hawaii, Trent withdrew $15,000 from a co-owned account. The account is under both his and your daughter's names." I gripped the phone. "Does Sarah know?" "Not sure, but the transaction was made online using his device." "I understand." "There's more," Karen continued. "I also discovered he met a woman in Vegas named Angela Wynn, a PR employee for a casino conglomerate. We have photos." I heard a pen drop onto the table, and in that moment, I realized that for the first time in many years, my pain and my reason stood on the same side. I was silent for a few seconds, then said slowly, "Keep everything. I want it all in my hands when the time comes." After hanging up, I poured a small glass of wine, not to forget, but to remember. I went out to the porch and watched the trees whispering in the wind. Memories of Margaret flooded back. She used to say, "You know, the best thing in a man isn't his strength, but the calm he has when he knows he's right." I spoke softly into the air. "I'm relearning that, Maggie." I was about to go back inside when the phone lit up. A short message from Sarah. "Dad, I hear Emily mentions you a lot. She says when she gets back she'll bake with you." I looked at that line, unsure whether to be happy or sad. Perhaps inside Sarah there was still a small part of the girl who once leaned on my shoulder at her mother's funeral, and Emily, though only 8 years old, was the single thread still holding us together. I added to the notebook, May 27th. There's still a bridge. Love sometimes survives in silence. The next day I woke early and walked around Eastwood Lake. I watched the sunlight reflect on the water, smooth, cold, and honest. I understood that to move forward I had to wash away all bitterness, because justice does not serve the resentful. It stands with the patient. At noon I stopped by Nordstrom and chose a new tie, silver with diagonal stripes. The clerk asked, "What's the occasion?" I replied, "An important meeting for a man who wants to be looked at with respect again." That night, when I hung the suit and tie side by side, I no longer saw in the mirror the image of a forgotten father, but of a man preparing for a presentation, perhaps before a board, perhaps before fate. I smiled. They will have to hear me one way or another. Before going to bed, I called James again. "Mr. Karen," I said, "I want you to investigate more thoroughly. If Trent is hiding something, I need every piece of evidence, but it must be legal. I don't want to give him a chance to say he was framed." "I understand," he replied. "I'll follow proper standards, but you should also be prepared. When everything comes out, it won't be only him who gets hurt." "I know," I said, "but I'm ready." I turned off the light and sat for a moment in the dark. From the living room, the small lamp reflected on the photo of Sarah smiling beside her daughter. 2 generations, 2 faces, and the same unspoken question: who truly understands the value of family? I spoke softly, like a promise. "You will see, Sarah. Not everyone who talks about love knows what love is." 3 days after that call, James Caron's package was delivered, neat as a military dossier. A thick envelope, sealed, the top corner stamped with Buckeye Investigations. I set it on the table beside a cup of coffee and Emily's small photo. For a moment I hesitated. Everyone has a moment when they know. After opening, nothing will be the same. I took a deep breath and cut the tape. Inside was a 17-page report, divided into 3 sections: finances, behavior, and contacts. I read every word, every number. May 19th, 9:42 a.m. Withdrawal transaction of $15,000 from a co-owned account at Summit Credit Union. Executor, Trent Green, logged in via personal iPad device. IP address matches home network in Columbus. Below was a screenshot of the transfer confirmation, an electronic signature clear as day. I felt as if someone had pressed a cold needle into my chest. The next section, irregular activity, Vegas. The bold line led down to 4 photos. In them, Trent wore a white shirt, sitting in the lobby of Wynn Las Vegas. Opposite him was a black-haired woman in a red dress, Angela Wynn. The photos were sequential, talking, laughing, then leaving the table together, his hand lightly touching her back. The last photo, they entered an elevator, just the 2 of them. Below was a caption, "Images obtained legally from public cameras." I paused a long time on that one, not out of jealousy on my daughter's behalf, but because I saw the smugness in his eyes, the look of a man who believes he can spin the world with a smile. The final section was a financial summary. Credit card debt of $46,800, 2 loan denials in March, and a transfer of $7,000 from Sarah's supplementary card to his personal account at First American Bank. All drawn from public data, James noted at the end. Unclear whether Sarah knows about this, but records confirm execution via Trent's device. She may be being used under the pretext of co-ownership. I closed the file, my heart both cold and clear. At noon, I called James. "Thank you, I've read everything. You work as precise as an engineer." He chuckled lightly. "I only collect data, but the way you respond tells me you're used to truth. You don't panic, you calculate. I used to teach load-bearing materials. What cannot withstand pressure will break. Families are the same. Do you want me to continue surveillance? No need. In the next phase, I'll handle it myself." That afternoon, I called Sarah. Her voice came light, a bit preoccupied. "Dad, I'm on shift." "It'll only take a minute," I said. "Do you know that $15,000 from the account under our two names has been withdrawn?" Silence. No. Trent said he was just moving money between family funds. How do you know?" "I monitor the statements. That is the right of a co-owner." Her voice trembled slightly. "Dad, why don't you trust Trent? He hasn't done anything wrong." I stayed calm. "Right or wrong, you should check your own account. He's using your email to access it." She took a deep breath and hung up without saying goodbye. I sat staring at the phone, listening to the silence spread through the room. That evening, James sent another small file, a 2-minute video, pulled from public cameras in Vegas. I opened it. Footage of Trent leaving the hotel with Angela. He turned back, placed a hand on her shoulder, and smiled. In that moment, he looked exactly like the peddlers of trust I had met in engineering, the kind who always convince others that a crack is just a tolerable deviation. But I knew that with a small enough error, the whole structure collapses. I printed the 4 photos and clipped them into an envelope. On the corner, I wrote by hand, "Don't let anyone else define your loyalty." I didn't send it, at least not yet. I just left it on the table, right beside Margaret's picture. She looked at me from the old wooden frame, eyes both sad and understanding. "You're doing the right thing," I whispered. 3 days later, Sarah came. No appointment. I was watering the plants when a gray Lexus stopped in front. She stepped out, still in her nurse's uniform, hair tied up, her face pale. "Dad," she said softly, "Trent told me not to worry, but I want to check the account again." I invited her into the house. The living room was as orderly as always, only the warm light from the window reflecting on her face. She looked both like the child she once was and the woman trying to hide her fear. I opened my computer and showed her the statement. Sarah stared at the line that read, $15,000 online transfer. She covered her mouth. "He said, it was joint investment money. I didn't think—" Her voice caught. I said nothing, only handed her the Vegas photos. She looked, eyes widening. Then tears fell, not loud, just one drop landing on the edge of the paper, blurring the caption, "Wynn Hotel, 10:23 p.m. "Dad, have you been monitoring him?" "I monitor the truth. I don't know whom to trust anymore." "Then trust what you see," I said softly. "And if you're afraid, think of Emily. She deserves to grow up in truth, not in a story someone else invents." Sarah sat in silence for a long time. I didn't touch her. I just poured us each a glass of water. When she stood, I knew something inside her had cracked. Small, but real. Before the door, she said quietly, "I'm not promising anything, but thank you for not yelling." "Love doesn't need a raised voice," I replied. That night I sat on the porch, watching light reflect on the glass of the newly installed doorbell camera. A small rabbit ran across the lawn, paused at the steps, then vanished into the dark. I thought that justice is sometimes like that. It arrives quietly, but once it arrives, nothing can stop it. I opened my notebook and wrote, May 30th. Sarah has seen the photos. There is no way back. The structure begins to move. I set down the pen and took a long breath. Outside, the moon shone on the lake, bright as freshly ground metal. I knew Trent Green's game was ending, but this time he wasn't the one moving the pieces. 3 days later, Sarah didn't call, but I knew she had acted. James sent me a short message. I saw her recheck the account Tuesday morning. 3 logins from her personal iPhone. I replied, "Thank you, just monitor for 48 hours more." No need to say much. Sometimes a father's silence is the strongest advice. That morning I sat on the porch with a hot coffee. Early summer sun filtered through the lilacs and reflected on the Ring camera glass. In the tiny screen I saw myself. Silver hair, a face strangely calm. At this age, people usually learn to accept. I didn't. I only learned to prepare. That afternoon, Trent called. He sounded like he'd just woken from a long sleep. "Mr. Cole," he said, trying to sound calm. "Sarah says you're investigating me?" I sipped coffee and didn't answer right away. "We're family," he went on. "No need to escalate. It's all a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I asked softly. "Which part? Vegas or the 15,000? He went quiet a few seconds, then forced a laugh. "Do you really think you know everything? Sometimes old men look in the wrong direction." "Maybe," I said, "but old men know how to read bank statements." He inhaled sharply, trying to steady his voice. "Sarah's very hurt. You're making her think I betrayed her." "I don't need to make her think anything," I said low. "She's just reading." On the other end came heavy breathing. Then the click of a call ended. I looked at the phone and smiled faintly. If he was angry, the first strike had landed. That night, I received an email from James. "The Vegas photos have spread in the Pacific Realty Brokers Group. An internal employee confirms Angela Wynn and Trent have met on 3 PR projects. I'm verifying the transaction history between them." I read and closed the laptop. Part of me wanted to call the police, but I knew, with a co-owned account, they'd say the evidence wasn't enough. I needed him to reveal more, so that when justice knocks, no one can deny it. Thursday morning, Sarah came again, unannounced. She didn't cry or shake. She just held a printed statement, trembling but clear. "Dad," she said, "he admitted the withdrawal, said it was for real estate investment, but he can't provide proof." I checked. There's no project called Pacific Growth like he says. I nodded. "You've just touched the wall." "What do you mean?" "The wall of truth. When people lie long enough, they forget the exit. Now he's starting to hit it." Sarah looked at me, pain and clarity mixed in her eyes. "I want to know everything, Dad, but I'm scared." "Don't be. You have Emily, and you have me." She sat in Emily's chair, resting her hand on the tablecloth where the child once drew a crayon heart. "She misses you a lot. She asks why we don't come back to visit. I don't know what to say." I smiled gently. "Tell her I'm still repairing the house, so when she returns, everything will be bright." Sarah gave a faint smile. "I wish I could redo everything." "No one can redo the past," I said, "but we can repair the future, if we dare to look straight at it." That afternoon, James stopped by with a USB and a new set of documents. There's evidence he withdrew another $5,000 from Sarah's supplementary account, this time sent to Angela Wynn via Venmo. Public transaction, no concealment. I looked at him and said quietly, "Sometimes the most confident people make the biggest mistakes, because they think they're too smart." James nodded. "I can arrange for this evidence to be sent to Sarah anonymously if you want." I shook my head. "No need. The child needs to see her father is still here, clear-headed, proactive, unafraid of the truth." As James left, he paused at the door and said softly, "Mr. Cole, I've investigated hundreds of cases. Rarely have I seen anyone stay this calm." "I used to teach young engineers how to test material strength," I replied. "If you want a true result, you don't strike too soon." He laughed. "If every father had your mind, the courts would have less work." That night I opened Margaret's photo. "See, Maggie," I murmured, "this game isn't about emotion anymore. It's about technique." Then I took up the notebook and wrote, "June 1st, Trent withdrew an additional $5,000, sent to Angela Wynn. Sarah is beginning to truly doubt. The structure is cracking. Next phase, legal verification." I closed the notebook and sat still. Outside, the wind shook the chimes on the porch, ringing small metallic notes. Each sound felt like the count of a mechanism ready to engage. I knew the wall around Trent's falsehoods had begun to fall, and when it collapsed completely, I wouldn't need anger. I would only need to bring in light. On June 7th, I received the first message from Sarah after nearly a week of silence. "Dad, I need to talk tonight, alone." The short message was enough for me to know that something inside her had changed. I set the table, brewed a pot of black tea, and left Emily's chair in its place, a reminder that whatever happened, there was still a reason to soften. Dusk fell as Sarah arrived. She entered with eyes more determined than ever, no more wavering between love and reason. She set her bag down, opened her phone, and showed me photos. Trent in a bar with Angela Wynn, taken from the Wynn Hotel's internal camera. "A friend of mine in Vegas sent them," she said softly. "She works there." I glanced. Same date as in Karan's photos, but a different angle. In this one, Trent was laughing, leaning toward Angela, lights reflecting off the glass, looking exactly like a man who feared nothing. "Do you want the little one to see this?" I asked. Sarah shook her head. "No, I just want to believe I wasn't blind for too long." I looked at her and said slowly, "You're not blind, you just love. And love sometimes makes us believe others also know how to cherish." We sat quietly for a few minutes. Outside, light rain began to fall, drops tapping the porch roof in steady rhythm like a clock. Sarah whispered, "I'm going back to Columbus, to talk to him face to face." "Good. But don't talk about feelings. Talk about facts." "I'm afraid. If he gets angry, then just say, 'There are cameras, there are statements, and there's your father as witness.'" Sarah nodded, smiling faintly. "You're still the same, always planning every step." "Not planning," I said. "Defending ourselves with truth?" She left around 10 that night. As the door closed, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered, and a man's voice came through. Hoarse, restrained with anger. "You think you're smart, Cole?" I recognized it immediately. "Trent. Stay out of my marriage. You're making things worse." "No," I said. "I'm just cleaning up what you've dirtied." "Careful," he growled. "I know people at the bank. One push, and you won't control your own accounts anymore." I smiled. "Try it. But remember, everything you just said is being recorded." Silence. I heard his heavy breathing, then the line went dead. I immediately sent the recording to James. He called back 10 minutes later. "Keep the original file. Financial threats are enough for a temporary restraining order if you want. But I guess you're not filing yet?" "Not yet," I said. "I want him to dig deeper." James chuckled. "You really understand this game, Mr. Cole." "I'm not playing. I'm balancing the scale." 2 days later, James emailed. Green withdrew another $2,000 using the supplementary card, tried to delete the transaction log, but the system cached it. I have the copy. Also, he filed an urgent loan at First American Bank using fake asset statements. Prosecution possible if passed to an attorney. I read every line, then looked up at Margaret's framed photo. "Maggie, you see, anything built on lies will eventually crack." That night Sarah called, her voice trembling. "Dad, I just got home. Trent knows I saw the photos. He threw his phone, yelled, said you're the one making me betray him. I think Emily heard everything." "Stay calm. Bring her here now. I'll be at the door." 30 minutes later, the gray Lexus stopped in front. Sarah carried Emily, her face hollow. The child rubbed her eyes, half asleep. "Grandpa, why is Mom crying?" I knelt, stroked her hair. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's just tired. Our house is still bright." When Sarah laid Emily in the guest bed, she sat on the sofa, pale. "Dad, he's not the man I married anymore. That look, I've never seen it." I poured water, set it before her. "That's not the look of a man who lost his wife. It's the look of a man who's lost control." She lifted her eyes, hoarse. "I think I'll file for separation, but I don't know where to start." Start by believing in yourself, I said. That night, when Sarah slept and Emily lay still in the next room, I stepped onto the porch. The wind carried a cool mist from the Miami Valley River. I opened my phone and replayed Trent's threat. Each sound hit like clashing metal. Cold, slick, emotionless. I sent the file to James with a note. Next step, temporary protection order. Then I wrote in my notebook, June 3rd, Sarah and Emily home. Trent threatened, recorded, and verified. Begin protection phase. I set the pen down, gazing at the yard bathed in porch light. The house that once was a widower's quiet shelter had become a small fortress, not to fight enemies, but to protect the one thing still pure, trust across 3 generations. And I knew by morning when sunlight crossed the porch, I would no longer just be a father. I would be a witness. Added scene, the belated birthday confrontation. Final, refined version. The next morning, Sarah sat in the living room, eyes red but dry. Dad, she said softly, I don't need him to explain, but I want him to face the truth in front of the people who once believed in him. I asked, what do you want to do? You'll host a belated birthday dinner, invite his whole family, his parents, his sister. I'll invite him. You just bring the files. I looked into my daughter's eyes, the same ones once filled with fear, now lit with resolve. I nodded. If that's what you want. That evening, the house glowed again, just like 7 years ago. The table was set like a real birthday. Lasagna, cake, wine, and Emily's favorite cat-shaped cookies. She twirled around the porch in a white dress, curls bouncing, humming You Are My Sunshine, while hanging silver ribbons. Grandpa, is it a birthday again? She asked, eyes bright. I smiled. Yes, sweetheart. But tonight, everyone gets to blow the candles. No one stands aside. At 7 sharp, Trent walked in, face tense, trying to hide his irritation beneath fake politeness. A belated birthday, Mr. Cole? Fancy setup. Behind him came his parents, the Greens, and his sister. I shook hands, invited them to sit. The start was light, clinking glasses, Emily's laughter. I saw Sarah squeeze her daughter's hand, then release it, giving me a signal. I understood. I stood up, voice calm. Before we blow the candles, I want to thank everyone for coming. I just have one thing to share. This year's gift isn't for me, but for the family. I placed the folder on the table and slid it toward Trent. This gift I think you should open. He glanced down, smirked. More paperwork? Sarah said nothing. When he flipped the first page, the room froze. Vegas photos, transfer records, hotel receipts, Angela Wynn's name in bold. He stood motionless. His mother gasped. Trent, my God, what have you done? Sarah took a breath, her voice trembling but clear. You can lie to me, but not to everyone in this room. Trent forced a laugh, looking around. This is a setup. He hired someone to spy on me. He's jealous because I'm more successful. I calmly pulled from my pocket a business card. Mr. Curran, former Montgomery County investigator. Everything gathered legally. No one spoke. Sarah stood, removed her wedding ring, and placed it on the table. Metal struck wood with a sharp, dry sound. After years of marriage, I realized the worst isn't betrayal. It's when someone can lie while looking straight into the eyes of the person they once loved. Trent yanked her arm, but I stepped between them. Enough, I said. Justice doesn't need to shout. Emily, holding her cat, stared wide-eyed. She looked at her mother and softly began to sing, You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. The whole room went silent. Sarah knelt, hugging her daughter as tears fell on the girl's shoulder. Why are you crying, Mommy? The child asked. Emily touched her mother's cheek. Grandpa said when someone makes you sad, sing so the light comes back. I stepped forward, resting a hand on both their shoulders. And tonight, I said, the light has returned. Trent's parents bowed their heads, unable to meet my eyes. His mother whispered, We're sorry, Mr. Cole. We didn't know. I nodded. No one is guilty for trusting someone they love. The mistake begins when we know and stay silent. Trent stood frozen, speechless, his smile gone, and I blew the candles with my granddaughter, listening to her laughter fill the house bathed in warm light. No one mentioned the word birthday again, but in that moment I knew this was the day I was truly born again. Monday morning, the Dayton sky was gray and soft, with drizzle falling gently on the trees outside the porch. I brewed coffee and looked through the window. Sarah was leading Emily to the backyard, the girl hugging the neighbor's cat and laughing. That laughter, after so many silent days, gave the house its heartbeat again. I knew at that very moment I needed to do what any clear-minded father would: protect his family with truth. At exactly 9 o'clock, I arrived at the Summit Credit Union branch downtown. The small meeting room had oak-paneled walls and white lights reflecting on the glass table. James Caron was already seated, a thick folder labeled "Green Case, Financial Misuse" in front of him. Moments later, Sarah's attorney, Linda Parker, a specialist in marital finance, entered. She shook my hand firmly. "Mr. Cole, I've reviewed everything. Today we just need to confirm co-ownership and prove unauthorized access. That's enough to request a temporary freeze." The branch manager, Mr. Harris, came in, clearly surprised at how prepared we were. "I'm sorry, but we'll need clear evidence of misuse before freezing any account." James slid the folder across. "Here's the access log report. 3 transactions from Trent Green's IP. Device not on the authorized list. And here, a falsified email authorizing joint signature. All verified." Harris's expression changed as he read. "This is serious. I'll forward it to our legal department immediately." Attorney Parker added, "Under Ohio law, Mr. Cole, as co-owner, has the right to request an internal 72-hour hold, pending verification." Harris nodded. "Agreed. The account will remain frozen until the court decides." I sat silently. There was no sense of victory, only relief, like loosening a rusted bolt that had been stuck for years. That afternoon, Sarah got her first call from Trent. I could hear it because she had the speaker on. "You got your father to freeze the account," he barked. "Not my father," she said calmly. "The bank." "I'll sue. You know I have friends at the tax office." "Go ahead," Sarah said, "but you know exactly how you took that money." Then she ended the call. No tears, no shaking. She just looked at me and smiled faintly. Now I understand what Mom meant when she said sometimes silence is resistance. That evening, James stopped by with printed receipts. The bank confirmed the freeze. Current balance, $82,000. Trent can't withdraw until a court order lifts it. I also found he filed a new loan in Columbus, suspended this morning after asset verification failed. I nodded. "Thank you, James. You should rest a few days. The next part, I'll speak to him myself." He raised a brow. "Personally?" "Yes. I believe in some places words still carry more weight than paperwork." 2 days later, I called Trent. He answered after 2 rings. "Heard you're busy finding a lawyer?" "Enjoying yourself, old man?" His voice was low and bitter. "You turned my wife against me. Now you want to destroy my reputation, too?" "I've taken nothing," I said. "I'm only keeping what you don't deserve." He laughed, harsh and hollow. "You think the bank, the lawyers, the law are on your side? The world runs on money, Cole, and yours is drying up." "Money can be lost," I said evenly, "but trust can't be bought back. You've spent both in a single day." Then I hung up. That night, Sarah sat beside me, watching the porch light reflect off the wall. "Dad, I'm scared he might come here." "Don't be," I said. "The cameras have motion sensors, and I notified local police about the pending freeze order. They'll patrol for a few nights." She nodded, exhaling softly. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need," I said. "Just remember this. Truth doesn't need belief. It only needs someone brave enough to hold it." After she went to bed, I opened my notebook. June 6th. Bank meeting successful. Account frozen. Sarah steady. Trent reacting, panicking. Phase 3, public exposure. I set down the pen. Outside, the rain fell, steady even like the house's heartbeat. In the next room, Emily laughed in her sleep. I smiled faintly. Maybe in a world full of deceit, only children sleep peacefully while adults rebuild justice. 2 days after the bank meeting, James texted, I submitted the confirmation report to Attorney Parker's office. Some info may now be in public records. The next morning, I woke to a flood of messages. An anonymous post had appeared overnight on a real estate forum. A senior manager at Pacific Realty suspected of misusing family funds and falsifying loan records. The name wasn't listed, but in the blurred photo, I recognized the tilted stance and half-smile of Trent. That alone was enough for the broker's community to start whispering. News spread faster than I expected. 3 days after the bank meeting, Pacific Realty's page issued a public statement. Trent Green denies financial misconduct and threatens legal action against the source of the rumors. His photo accompanied the post. Gray suit, red tie, confident smile, the look of a man who thinks image alone can save him. Dozens of comments followed. Some defended, some doubted. But I knew. When a man starts speaking publicly, it means he's afraid. That afternoon, James arrived with a thick envelope. Mr. Cole, he's holding a shareholders' press conference in Columbus this Saturday morning. I got an invite from an inside contact. Do you think I should go? I asked. No need to think, he replied. This is your time to stand tall. I'll go with you if you like. Good. And we're not going to retaliate. We're going to remind him that truth also knows how to reach the microphone. Saturday morning, I wore the freshly pressed navy suit and silver striped tie. In the car, James drove while I stayed silent. Sunlight hit the dashboard, the clock hands pointing exactly 9:17, the stillness before a storm. You all right? James asked. I'm not going to get angry, I said. I'm going to prove that silence isn't weakness. The Columbus Grand Hotel's conference room gleamed with white light. Over 60 people, investors, staff, a few local reporters, sat around the long table. On stage, Trent stood in the center under the spotlight. Lapel mic clipped on, his voice smooth as glass. Recent rumors about my personal finances are false. My wife, Sarah, and I are handling things privately. I assure you, every expense is transparent. A reporter asked, Can you explain the $15,000 withdrawal from Summit Credit Union? Trent smiled. That account was for joint investments, nothing illegal. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. I watched him calm. James leaned close and whispered, Now or never. I stood, walked toward the spare microphone near the door. Heads turned. An employee stepped forward. Sir, this is a closed session. James flashed his old investigator badge and said firmly, I'm a private consultant representing the co-owner of that account. Mr. Cole has the right to speak. The air in the room changed color. Trent tried to keep smiling, but I could see the cords in his neck tightening. I took the mic, my voice low and steady. I need 1 minute. I'm Franklin Cole, co-owner of the account Mr. Green just mentioned. I have copies of the Summit Credit Union statements confirming 3 unauthorized withdrawals, along with login devices registered to him. I held up the paper. James plugged a USB into the projector. The access logs appeared with an IP line matching Trent's home address. The room went silent. Trent stepped down, forcing his voice to stay even. You're violating my privacy. Attorney Parker, seated at the back row, stood. No, Mr. Green. This account is jointly owned, and the data was obtained lawfully under Ohio statute. Another reporter cut in. Mr. Green, did you file a loan at First American Bank using inaccurate asset statements? Trent choked. James changed the slide, a screenshot of the denial email for inconsistent verification. I said nothing more. The lights were straight on him. His face went pale. My voice carried slow and clear. People say family is where we trust one another, but if trust is sold for $15,000, that's not a family. It's a fraudulent contract. No one spoke. The cameras kept rolling. I looked around and finished. I didn't come to smear anyone. I came to return the truth to my daughter and to make sure my granddaughter grows up without learning to pretend. I set the mic down and walked out. Behind me, whispers flared and flashes popped. James beside me murmured, "He'll collapse quickly. The press will do the rest." I said, "No need to bring him down. Truth weighs enough to drag him by itself." That afternoon, Sarah called, her voice shaking, but not from fear. "Dad, I saw the video. The whole company is talking. He isn't coming home anymore." I paused. "Are you all right?" "I am. Emily's drawing you under the lilacs, saying, 'Grandpa protects the light.'" I smiled. "Tell her light doesn't need protection. It only needs not to be covered." That night I wrote, June 9th, shareholders meeting, evidence public. He's losing ground. The family is starting to see one another again. I closed the notebook, laid the pen on the table, lifted my head, and breathed deep. Perhaps after all these years I've learned, sometimes justice needs no court. It only needs someone to step out of the dark and say, "I'm here." 2 days after the shareholders meeting, Dayton was rainy again. A fine, stubborn drizzle, drops ticking on the metal roof like a clock counting between two worlds. Calm on one side, storm on the other. I was making coffee when the phone rang. James. His voice was hoarse, excited. "Mr. Cole, turn on Channel 7 now. They're covering Pacific Realty." I grabbed the remote. The screen, lit, crawl at the bottom. "Senior manager suspended pending investigation over alleged financial fraud and ethical misconduct." There he was, Trent leaving the company building, hooded raincoat, reporters swarming. He dodged questions and only said, "No comment." His face was bloodless, the podium swagger gone. I felt neither joy nor gloating, only that the inevitable had arrived on time, like a train. Sarah came from the bedroom with her phone. "Dad, HR at the hospital sent an internal notice. Pacific Realty under investigation, Trent suspended. He texted me a few lines, begging for help." I was quiet. "What will you do?" I asked. She sat, watching the rain. Before, I'd have said he just lost his way. "Now, I only want to protect Emily." I nodded. "That's the one thing you must do right now." At noon, James stopped by and set a local paper on the table, the Dayton Herald. "The Undercurrent After Vegas." The piece was long, citing sources from Summit Credit Union and bank files verifying misconduct. At the end, a small line. "Initial inquiry information originated from a request by co-owner Mr. Franklin Cole of Dayton." I looked at it and smiled. "Now everyone knows my name." James said, "Sometimes for a father to hear his child trust him again, the world has to hear him first." That afternoon, Trent video called. I sat beside Sarah in silence. On screen, he was ashen, stubbled. "Sarah, I need you. You know I never meant to hurt anyone. She cut him off. "You just needed money, and other things you thought no one knew about." Her voice dropped, each word a fine blade. "Vegas isn't far enough to hide betrayal, Trent. You can delete messages and block numbers, but you can't erase the way you looked at someone else, the way you once looked at me." He stalled, then forced a smile. "You're misunderstanding. Angela is just—" "Don't say her name," Sarah said, eyes red, voice cold. "You betrayed me not only by what you did, but by every line you rehearsed like a script. You turned both love and money into tools. And now you want me to believe it was a small mistake? I'm a nurse. I know there are wounds that never stitch, because the one who caused them never wanted to heal." He lowered his voice, reaching, "I still love you. And our child." She shook her head, tears no longer falling. "Love isn't a receipt, Trent. It has no electronic signature, and it cannot coexist with betrayal." She ended the call. I saw a new strength in her shoulders, the kind even I hadn't expected to return after 7 years. We ate in quiet that night. Emily sat beside us, cutting the leftover cat-shaped cookie from the belated birthday. "Grandpa," she asked, "why are they talking about my dad on TV so much?" I answered slowly, They're talking about grown-up things. But remember, when someone does wrong, the best thing is to admit it and start again. She nodded, thinking, like when I draw the cat wrong and I redraw it. I smiled. Exactly. 3 days later, a stamped envelope arrived from Columbus. Inside was a 4-page handwritten letter from Trent, letters slanting. I've lost everything. They froze the accounts. The company suspended me. I'm not asking forgiveness, only to see Emily. I read it to Sarah. She bit her lip, then shook her head. No, not yet. She needs time to learn that a real father is the one who keeps his promises, not the one who writes letters. I folded it and put it in the drawer with the case papers. When you're ready, we'll open it, I said. That afternoon, the rain broke. A weak sun slipped through the clouds and lit the porch. I stepped outside into the smell of wet earth and lilac. On the table, my coffee still steamed. James called again. They've officially filed charges for financial fraud. Your evidence was strong enough. You should prepare to testify. I said, I've been preparing since that empty birthday. He laughed. If every witness were as clear-headed, court would be easier. Evening came. Sarah opened the living room door, holding Margaret's framed photo. Dad, she said, I think Mom would be proud. I looked at the lamp's glow on the glass. Your mother wouldn't be proud because we won. She'd be proud because we didn't become what he is. She nodded, set the photo down, and took my hand. Thank you, Dad. I think I understand why they say justice has no smell of blood, only the scent of truth. That night, I wrote a new line. June 13th. News spread. Trent suspended. Sarah clear-minded. Emily still laughing. Rain has stopped, but the ground is wet. Next phase. Testimony and rebirth. I set the pen down and stared at the porch. A light breeze carried lilac and warm, damp air. Maggie, I whispered to the night, the light has stayed, and this time it's long enough to guide all three of us. The hearing was set for the morning of June 26th at the Montgomery County Courthouse. The sky was crystalline, that kind of blue that makes everything look freshly washed. I arrived early in the old Navy suit, the same one that had walked this whole road, while Sarah sat behind me gripping her small notebook. James and Attorney Parker were already waiting in the hall, fluorescent light glazing the polished tiles like a thin mist. When Trent entered, I felt no hatred. He looked changed, thinner, unmoored eyes. A shabby gray suit, a loosened tie, a rasp when he answered the judge. His public defender said, My client admits financial impropriety, but denies intent to defraud. The court read the exhibits, one by one. Bank statements, the recorded threat, the Vegas photos, First American Bank's denial, and the Summit Credit Union records I had submitted. When the prosecutor called me, I walked to the stand and placed my hand on the Bible. Mr. Franklin Cole, the judge said, Do you have anything to say to the court? I drew a breath, speaking evenly. I don't want to punish anyone. I want the truth recorded right. That man did not only withdraw money, he withdrew the trust of a family. And when an old father like me has to stand here, not out of anger, but to teach his granddaughter that justice is real, I think that's enough. The room fell silent. The judge looked at me and nodded slowly. Statement admitted. After 2 hours of deliberation, the verdict was read. Trent Green was found guilty of financial fraud and falsified loan filings, sentenced to 10 years in prison with no parole for the first 4 years. As the officers cuffed him, he turned as if to speak, then lowered his head. I didn't watch him go. Sarah covered her mouth but didn't cry. Only one tear fell, light as dew, and I knew it was no longer pain. It was release. 3 weeks later, the news stopped mentioning the case. Life in Dayton returned to calm. In the mornings, I still woke early to make coffee and water the lilacs by the porch. Sarah took a few weeks off to stay with me and Emily. The two of them repainted the fence and planted more lavender by the window. The scent of new paint mixed with flowers, and the house felt alive again. One afternoon, Emily brought me her new drawing, a small house under a rainbow sky. "Grandpa, I named it Home Again," she said brightly, "because you smile again." I bent down, brushing her soft curls. "You know, sweetheart, sometimes to find home again, we have to lose almost everything. But as long as there's someone who truly cares beside us, we'll never be lost." Sarah stood at the doorway, holding a cup of tea. "Dad," she said softly, "I contacted Attorney Parker. They suggested reopening the old account, completely removing Trent's name. I want to start over, step by step." I nodded. "Do it. But remember, don't rush to forget. Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing, it means remembering without pain." That night we had lasagna again, the meal that began it all. But this time there was no empty chair. Emily sat between us, laughing as she told stories from school. A small cake with "Home Again" written in icing sat at the center, heart-shaped candles flickering. When the flames danced, Sarah whispered, "Dad, thank you for never letting go, even when I was wrong." I smiled at her. That's the one thing a father must never do. Suddenly Emily looked up, her innocent voice cutting through the quiet. "Grandpa, is my dad still a bad person?" The question was light as breath, yet it stilled the table. I looked at her and saw in those clear eyes no hatred, only the curiosity of a child still wanting to believe in good. I stroked her hair gently and said, "No, sweetheart, your dad is just someone who got lost. And when people realize they're lost, sooner or later, they find their way home. But when they do, what matters is whether someone has left the light on for them." Emily tilted her head, smiling. "So you'll leave the light on, Grandpa?" I nodded, smiling. "Always, my dear. Light exists to guide, not to judge." After dinner, we stepped out to the porch. The July breeze was cool. Garden lights glimmered over the pond. Emily ran around, laughing, then looked up. "Grandpa, a shooting star. Make a wish." I closed my eyes and whispered, "Maggie, if you can hear me, know that the light you left has found its way." That night I wrote the final lines in the notebook that had followed me through this whole journey. July 26th. Everything has closed. Justice came, not for revenge, but to remind me that truth can live quietly inside a small house, filled with a child's laughter. The story ends here, not with judgment, but with peace. I set down the pen and closed the book. On the porch, moonlight covered the trees with a thin silver glow. Sarah turned off the living room lamp, and Emily softly sang, "You are my sunshine." Her little voice was small, but carried far. I leaned back in my chair, eyes closed. For the first time in years, I didn't count the time anymore. I just let it flow, like light through the window, gentle, real, and lasting, long enough to be called happiness. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you for believing that stories of justice still have a place in this world. If you've ever faced betrayal or stood in the dark, unsure where to begin, remember, the light is always around you, waiting for someone brave enough to hold it. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and tell me where you're listening from. Because somewhere out there, someone might need a reminder like this, to believe that justice isn't an ending, but a beginning for those brave enough to live truthfully.